we are outside the presence of the jury. One of the jurors, I think it's juror 673, asked if we could finish early on June 19th at 3:30. And so we'll plan on ending early on June 19th. That's a Friday. Okay. Are the parties ready for the jury, the people?
Your Honor, quickly on the last matter we left off with D14A, yes, I would respectfully expand my request to include an in-camera review of those documents as well.
Okay, so you're asking for both then?
Yes, sir.
All right. And same record from the defense, Ms. Nelson?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. All right, is the defense ready for the jury?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, let's bring him in, please. The record should reflect the jury's back in the courtroom. Please be seated, everyone. Welcome back, members of the jury. Right before the morning break, Mr. Orman was in the middle of his direct examination of the Sergeant Gertenman. And so, Sergeant, I'll remind you that you're still under oath, okay?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Orman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Sergeant, I don't have many more questions for you. I think I might have forgotten to ask you this one. This video that we just saw, about what time did you make entry into the apartment with the robot?
It was roughly about 4:14 in the morning.
What happened with the robot? Now, this video is about 15 minutes long, so that gets us up to about, what, 4:30? Is that
Correct.
fair? All right. What did you do with the robot at 4:30?
It basically, we went ahead and ran the video up to an extent, and then we shut it down because we've only got so much storage space on the hard drive that we were recording to, and we knew this was going to be an extensive stay, so we shut the robot down while we were doing some planning and some investigations.
How long did you stay there before you went home?
On the 20th, we were all the way until roughly about 5:30 or so that evening.
Did the robot stay in that same position the whole time?
Yes, that is correct.
At some point that day, did you send someone up to check on the robot?
Yes, we did. We basically just made sure that there was no other hazards or anything like that.
You said you stayed there until sometime in the late afternoon. Did you get back the next day?
Yes, roughly about 6 o'clock in the morning on the 21st.
That would be Saturday?
Yes.
What did you do when you got there in the morning on the 21st?
On the 21st, we went ahead and sent 2 bomb techs up to the robot to switch out the battery on the robot so we had fresh batteries on it. And we also removed the tires on the robot to make it more mobile when we actually go in to make entry into the apartment.
Now, if it doesn't have tires, how's it going to move?
It's actually got tracks on it also. So the tires are there to make it so it's easier and it travels quicker on surfaces like grass, asphalt, and that kind of stuff. The tires can be removed, and then it lowers itself down onto kind of like tank tracks.
At that point, did you and other people participate in what's called render safe procedures?
Yes, that is correct.
And what does that mean, render safe?
What we're end up doing is we are we have a certain plan of dismantling a device, so it basically makes it safe, so bomb techs can actually make entry, or evidence techs can make entry to collect evidence and that kind of stuff.
And is the idea not to set off the device?
Yes, that is the idea.
You trained to do that?
Yes.
Let's talk about the contraption with the thermos and the frying pan and the fishing line. Did you use the robot personally to render that safe?
Yes, I did.
All right, can you tell us what you did?
Once we were assured that we had a clear area that we could maneuver the robot, I turned the robot towards the thermos, and
Let me stop you there. How'd you get assured that you had a clear area?
we actually had a bomb tech in a bomb suit go up and visually inspect the entrance to the apartment to make sure that there weren't any additional booby traps. The camera on the robot can catch quite a bit, but with a two-dimensional item, you might miss something. So we wanted eyes on. So we sent basically Detective Casey Overton up in a bomb suit to confirm that there was no other obstacles, that the robot would actually activate the booby trap.
Did you learn that you could actually operate the robot?
Yes.
All right, so what did you do?
At that point, we went ahead and maneuvered the robot into the apartment. I positioned the arm to reach over and grab the thermos. At first, with the cameras, the way they are situated, there's no real depth perception. It's a two-dimensional item that I'm looking at on a screen. So there's no real depth perception for me to see how close I am to the thermos. And I did not want to knock the thermos over into the pan. So we were trying to grab the handle of the thermos with the gripper of the robot. When I reached in to grab it, because there's not real any depth perception, I misjudged when I was gripping the actual thermos. And I grabbed the handle, but also a portion of the lid. And when I did that, the thermos kind of tilted over to the left side of the frying pan. The thermos did not tip over to the point where it was dumping out the contents, but it did maneuver itself away from the frying pan. That allowed me to believe that I could get a hold of the frying pan and maybe grab it and pull it away from the thermos, and that would solve the problem.
Did you do that?
I went to attempt to do that. When I went to pull on the frying pan, I realized that the handle of the frying pan was stuck underneath the thermos, and when I went to maneuver and pull that frying pan out, it pulled the thermos back towards the frying pan. So at that point, we realized that was not going to work, so I had to definitely get a hold of the thermos and pull the thermos away from the frying pan. Since it had tipped to the side, it allowed the handle much easier to grip with the gripper. So I was able then to maneuver the gripper of the robot onto the handle, lift up the thermos so it's pointed in its normal position, and then I removed the thermos from the apartment.
What did you do with the frying pan after that?
After the thermos was pulled out and given to one of our other bomb techs, I went in, and to preserve evidence, we went ahead and I went in and grabbed the frying pan, and I picked up the frying pan with the arm of the robot and then pulled it out also.
And was that Shane Hyder, the other tech you're talking about?
Yes, that is correct.
Later on, now was this the first step that was taken in the render safe procedure, what you just described?
Yes, that is correct. The booby trap was the most important thing at that time that we believed that needed to be render safe.
Okay, now we're going to hear about blowing up something on top of the refrigerator from a different witness. Did the robot participate in that?
All the robot did is videotape what it could see from the doorway.
And the things that we've seen in the apartment, did you participate with the robot in rendering safe the other devices as well?
Yes, I did.
Can I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Any cross-examination? Yes, sir. You may proceed.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to start out with when you first arrived at 1690 Paris Street. when you arrived at the apartment building, the information that you learned was that the apartment deadbolt was locked. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And so as a result, you got the robot set up to shoot out the deadbolt
That is correct.
using a 12-gauge knockout round.
That is correct.
And that was all recorded with the robot camera,
Yes, it was.
okay, as well as the entry into the apartment.
That is correct.
I'm going to approach with what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 10, 11, and 12. And I'm showing the district attorney the exhibit.
Are you moving the admission of these exhibits?
I am.
All right, without objection, defense's exhibits D-TR-10, 11, and 12 are admitted and may be published.
Sergeant, I've handed you those 3 exhibits now. We'll go through them during the course of my questioning.
Okay.
But I'd like to start out with exhibit number 11. Is that a disc?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And on that disc, are there short clips from that video,
Of short clips from what video?
from that bomb robot video?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And did you have a chance to review those clips?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And does it accurately reflect the work that you did during the time that those recording is playing?
Yes, it does.
Okay. What I'd like to do is I'd like to start off with Defendant's Exhibit 11, Clip A, and show us all that clip, and then have you talk about that. Does Clip A show the lock being blown out? Do you remember?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. Now, as a result of that hit, the locking mechanism itself broke, and there's a photograph in front of you that documents the locking mechanism. Is that an accurate reflection of what happened to that lock?
Yes, it is.
Okay. If we could please show Defendant's Exhibit 10. Okay. And that's a lock that would have to be locked from the inside, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, the footage also captured when you entered the apartment, and if we could play clip B, which is footage of the robot entering the apartment. Then I want to talk a little bit about the robot itself.
Okay.
Now, you were able to get that front door all the way open, is that right?
Yes, as far as we could, yes.
Okay. And then we see a closet on the opposite side of the door when that front door gets opened further. And then there's a door to the left of the front door. Is that the closet door?
Yes, that is the closet door.
Okay. And when you arrived, you saw that that door was fully open?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the robot is a heavy thing, is that right?
Yes, it is.
A bulky thing?
Yes, it is.
It's about 4 feet?
Roughly, yes.
Okay. Described as a bull in a china shop?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, you also captured through the footage what the apartment looked like, both with the robot light on, but there's also footage that you took where you turned the robot light off. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. I want to see if if the next clip is footage with the light off. If we could play clips, C, please, and that's on D. 11. That does not appear as light as the clips shown by the district attorney. What's going on with the lighting on the robot?
We have basically shut the lights off of the robot. We were looking for any other LED light or anything else that would draw our attention.
Okay, so from that doorway, we can see with the robot light off that it's not completely dark in that apartment.
That is correct.
There are two lights that are on.
That is correct.
We've got the red light on the right side of the computer, the blue lamp on the left side of the computer.
That is correct.
The computer is on, which emanates light.
Yes,
And then as well, we have blinking lights on the floor.
that is correct.
Now, you were asked some questions about your experience as a bomb technician and evaluating what you saw as being potentially hazardous within the apartment. And I want to talk about that a little bit. Now, the frying pan and the thermos contraption that you first see, after you had a chance to take in the environment, you saw that as more incendiary than explosive. Is that right?
That is correct.
And similarly, the glass jars with that ammunition, you also saw that because it allegedly contained napalm as more incendiary than explosive.
That is correct.
Now, around noon on Friday, July 20th, you and your team participated in a briefing at the Paris Street building, is that right?
That is correct.
And that briefing was with members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, members of other bomb squads like the Denver bomb squad?
That is correct.
Okay, because you're all working this together.
That is correct.
And at that time, your team, as well as the Denver team, you were ready to initiate or start the render safe procedures.
That is correct.
But you were told at that time to stand down,
Yes.
okay? And who told you that?
That would be our Lieutenant Roger Kelly. He was the commander of the scene at that time.
And was he getting that information from a different agency?
I believe so. He didn't provide that information to us.
Okay. And you didn't get started that afternoon, is that right?
That is correct.
You were actually told to you were told to go home, disassemble at about 4 o'clock that afternoon,
That is correct.
and to return the next morning at 6 a.m.
Yes.
And when you returned the next morning, and you got a chance to look into the apartment again, you noticed that the closet door that we saw that was all the way open at the entry had actually moved and moved and was now leaning against the front door. Is that right?
That is correct.
And that was likely because of the windows had all been broken out and wind had come through the windows and had knocked that door closed?
That's what we concluded, yes.
Okay. And to back up, the day before, in order for the different agencies to get a better view into the apartment while the robot was in the threshold in the doorway, the windows were broken out, each individual window was broken out in Mr. Holmes' apartment?
Yes, there was two reasons for that. One, for a better view, and also to vent the room a little bit because we noticed there was gas within the room.
Okay. And so when you were told to stand down and to leave the scene, it seems as though the windows weren't boarded up in any way to protect what was in the apartment.
No, they were not.
Okay. And you and your agency certainly had your hands full with what you were doing. There were other agencies on scene who could have provided that assistance to you
For,
to close off those windows.
we wouldn't want to close off the windows due to the gasoline and that. We're basically then closing in all of the gas vapors, and that could cause a bigger hazard.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, the following day, you were talking about the work that you did. Now, you were the one who successfully removed that thermos in the frying pan,
That is correct.
and the Denver Bomb Squad used a hydrojet water disruptor in the kitchen on the initiating device or firework initiating device on top of the refrigerator.
That is correct.
And your video took footage of that.
Yes.
And that shows both the explosion as well as the aftermath, if you will, of how the explosion affected what was still contained in the apartment.
Yes, it does.
And if we could play clip D for all of us on Defendant's Exhibit 11. Now we're in daylight hours.
Yes.
We saw on the right-hand side of the screen at the end of the clip, on that chair, there's a jar, and there's a bowl on top of the jar that fell off as a result of the Denver explosion, or the explosion in the kitchen. And that didn't trigger any fire, that didn't do anything to initiate any incendiary activity, correct?
No, it did not.
Now, your work began on the morning, Saturday, July 21st, about 8:50 a.m.?
Roughly, yes.
Okay. And once you got going, once you were able to get going, it went pretty quick in terms of your ability to disassemble and remove the devices in the apartment?
Yes, it did.
And by noon, you were actually working on those, the launch control receivers that were in the living room?
Yes.
And as your disassembly continued, as your work progressed that morning, you continued to see the situation as more incendiary.
As we went through, yes, that is correct.
Even more so after you disassembled one of those shells that we see in the living room, the black shells, and that had gasoline in it.
We didn't know exactly what the contents was. We had heard from one of the other agents that that's what it was. But we went ahead and decided to open up one of the shells just to confirm before we started dismantling a lot of other things.
Okay. And you also opened a shell, and it was empty.
Yes.
Okay. And there's footage of that disassembly process.
Yes, there is.
Okay. If we could show all of us clip E, please, from Defendant's Exhibit 11. And are you using the arm of the robot to pick up the shell?
Yes, we're not actually going to pick it up. We're basically just going to use the gripper to squeeze it to kind of pop it open.
You can, and that's the shell, or a shell that was empty.
Yes.
And then if we could please show clip F. And that seemed to release wet,
Right.
glop
a wet,
onto the-
a wet substance with a little black in it onto the carpeting.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize. Thank you. And what you eventually did with the robot arm, you were able to move what I'll call that cluster in the middle of the living room, push that to the side to allow a path to get to the half shells that were along the living room wall?
That is correct.
Now, we saw that you were able to pop those shells open to see what was inside. And those 6-inch black shells also assisted you in your analysis of the scene in that those were 2 pieces of plastic, right?
That is correct.
Now, explosives are a secured unit. Explosives, generally speaking, are a secured unit or contained in a secured unit.
Usually, yes.
For example, a pressure cooker or a pipe bomb that is closed off.
That is correct.
And to make the black plastic shells explosive, to make them into a secured unit, one of the ways you could do that is by wrapping duct tape around that middle. Is that right?
That is correct.
And you and your team did some research, or your team, you were busy, did research on the launch control firework initiating system we saw in the living room.
That is correct.
Okay, and we saw those two boxes, one in the first cluster and one on the side of the living room against the wall.
That is correct.
Okay. And if we could, and is that reflected, are those boxes reflected in the footage?
Yes, it is.
If we could show all this clip G, please, of defendants 11. And that would be following the Denver explosion, or Denver work in the kitchen. We see the launch control box. Now, the lights are moving sequentially, but that does not mean that that box is armed, correct?
That is correct.
In order to arm the launch control initiating system, you'd actually need to use that remote that was on the dining room table to arm the system.
That's what we found out via the internet, yes.
Okay. And so even if someone took the remote but did not know how to arm the system and just pressed a single button, nothing would have happened.
We can't say that because people have a tendency to tamper with an item, and they could basically make it seem like that's the only way it can happen, but there could be other ways, such as pressure plates, things that could be attached to this controller that we can't necessarily see.
Okay. And those are things that you have to keep in mind as you're disassembling these devices.
That is correct.
You didn't come across any evidence that that remote was tampered in that way, and you didn't come across any evidence of pressure plates in the apartment, correct?
No, not as we went through the apartment with the robot. No, we did not find
Okay.
those.
And we saw that that launch control along the living room wall was actually just, was next to a series of half shells, right?
That is correct.
So even if those half shells received heat from an initiating system, they would have melted.
I can't say that.
Okay. And you also learned that the launch control initiating system, in order to initiate it, we need line of sight with the remote in the box.
Yes, that's what it said on the internet.
And so if there was an attempt to be made out, let's say, out in the parking lot with the remote from the launch control, that signal would not be able to go through a concrete building. Is that your understanding?
According to the factory specs, that is correct.
Okay. And finally, I want to go back in time to when you brought the robot up to the 3rd level of the apartment building. Now, Mr. Holmes' apartment was on the top level of the apartment building.
That is correct.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that there are staircases on both the east and the west side of the building to allow tenants access up and down.
That is correct.
Okay. And what you did is you brought the robot up the east staircase.
That is correct.
Okay. And does Defendant's Exhibit 12 accurately depict the hallway on the 3rd floor?
Yes, it does.
Okay. If we could publish that, please. So we're seeing apartment 10 on the right side, and we see the robot in the front of the screen.
Yes.
And that would be the west side staircase, correct?
That is correct.
But we see the east side staircase on the far side of that hallway.
That is correct.
Okay. And when you came up to the top of that east staircase, you were approximately 50 feet from the doorway?
Yes, I would say yes.
And that was about 3:30 in the morning on July 20th?
Roughly, yes.
Okay. You couldn't smell anything at the top of that east staircase?
I wasn't focused on that. I was more focused on, we had basically, at that east hallway that you're looking at there, we had 2 SWAT members with shields and everything else protecting myself and another bomb tech with me. So my focus was just getting the robot up, getting it in place, and getting down as quick as I could.
Okay.
So my focus was not on smelling gasoline.
Okay, and that makes sense, but no recollection of smell? Okay. Your Honor, if I may have a moment.
Yes, you may.
I have no further questions, thank you.
Mr. Orman, do you have any redirect?
I do. Could we please play the number C from Defense Exhibit 11? Or letter C, I should say. Can we pause that, please? No, can you go back a second? Pause that. I'll give you a warning in about a second. Keep that a little bit more. Stop. Thank you. Perfect. Now, see the wall there?
Yes,
It appears to be illuminated, doesn't it?
yes.
What's that illuminated with?
It's from the lamp that's
Okay.
there.
All right. Thank you. Is there any light on your device at all, like a navigation light or anything like that?
At this point,
Yeah.
no, we
Okay.
have turned down the lights on the
Okay.
robot itself.
Yankee, you can take that down. Now, counsel asked you about a deadbolt lock. You remember
Yes.
that? And she asked you if it could only be locked from the inside. You remember that?
Objection leading.
Overruled? It's foundational.
Do you remember that?
Yes,
Did it have a keyhole on it?
yes, it did.
So could it have been locked from the outside of the apartment?
Objection leading.
Overruled?
With a key, yes, it can.
Thank you. Now, counsel asked you some questions when you were looking at some clips about things being more incendiary or some of the items being more incendiary than explosive. Is that right?
That is correct.
So incendiary devices are completely safe, right? They can't kill anybody, they can't hurt anybody. Is that correct?
Objection leading and argumentative.
All right, wait till he finishes the question. The objection as to leading is sustained. Rephrase the question. That's Rule 611C. Go ahead.
Are incendiary devices by their very nature safe?
No, they are not.
Are they dangerous?
Yes, they are.
Can they kill people?
Yes, they can.
Can they hurt people?
Yes, they can.
Can they burn down apartment buildings full of sleeping people?
Objection, Your Honor, argumentative, 403, leading.
The objection as to argumentative under 611A is overruled. The objection as to leading is overruled under 611C, and the objection as to relevance is overruled under 401 and 402.
Please answer.
Yes,
If a police officer enters an apartment with an incendiary device connected to a booby trap, can it kill him?
yes, it can.
Can it hurt him?
Yes, it can.
Let's talk about the gasoline that you talked about on cross-examination. And counsel asked you a question about containment causing explosions. Is that right?
Containment,
In other words, you have to have a container really for some things to explode. Is that right?
usually, yes. Yeah.
In other words, low explosives need a container?
No.
Okay, what do they need to explode?
To explode?
Yeah.
Just a proper chemical mixture.
Okay. Well, do you remember counsel asking you some questions about those, I'll call them fireworks mortar shells, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And how that could be a container for an explosion. Do you remember
It
that?
can be, yes.
And she also asked you about them containing gasoline. Were you aware that inside those 6-inch shells was a smaller 3-inch shell?
Yes, we did find out that was the case.
And do you know what was inside the smaller 3-inch shell that was in those 6-inch shells?
It was black powder.
So what happens when you put black powder inside a fireworks shell that's designed to explode?
It has a tendency to explode.
Is that an explosive?
Yes, it is.
Now, by the time you were manipulating these objects and they seemed to fall apart when you were squeezing them with the robot, do you know how long they'd been in that apartment?
At least 24 hours.
Or do you know how long whatever liquid had been inside them had been there?
I couldn't tell you that.
Do you know whether or not that liquid could act as a solvent to soften and weaken those shells?
Yes, it could.
So by the time let me ask you this. By the time you did that, could those shells have been in a much weaker and softer condition than when they were originally put in there?
Yes, because they're not made to hold gasoline or anything like that.
Let's talk about gasoline, because you talked about that in cross-examination. You talked about gasoline in the apartment. Can gasoline, if it's in a confined space, cause an explosion?
Yes, it can.
Now, if you saturate an apartment with gasoline and gasoline vapors and they are set off on fire, can that cause the entire apartment to explode?
Yes, it can.
And then, really, wouldn't that turn the entire apartment into a giant explosive device?
Objection, Your Honor. Form of the question. Argumentative. Leading.
The objection as to argumentative is overruled under 611A. The objection as to leading under 611C is sustained. Rephrase the question, please.
What is an explosive device?
An explosive device is, it could be many, many things. An explosive device is when the chemical makeup within a enclosed area reaches a proper mixture, and when it is ignited, will cause an explosion.
Now, you talked about the apartment could explode from the gasoline. Does an explosive device have to be something small?
No, it does not.
Can it be as big as an apartment?
Yes, it can.
All right, so, I think you've answered my question. Counsel asked you about those jars on the chairs with the bullets in them. Remember that? And whether you thought those were incendiary devices more than explosive devices?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about what she asked you about those jars. Did you see those jars had bullets in them?
Yes, they did.
Okay. And you probably don't know this because you've been under sequestration, but we've had previous evidence in this case that the defendant bought...
I'm going to object to this.
She asked him if those jars were incendiary devices.
Right, hold on. Overruled.
We've had previous testimony in this case that the defendant said that there was napalm in those jars. Is napalm a flammable substance?
Yes, it is.
And so would that be concurrent with your position that you stated to counsel in cross-examination that that would be a inflammatory, I'm sorry,
Incendiary.
incendiary, I forgot it, incendiary device?
Yes.
And does that mean it would burn?
Excuse me?
Does that mean it would burn?
It has a tendency, yes.
What happens to bullets when you burn them?
Well, the black powder within them, basically it can heat up and ignite, and the gases, it off gases, and the shell casing can explode.
Does that sound like a gunshot?
Yes, it can.
So it's an incendiary device starting a fire. Does the fire department often come to that?
Yes.
Overruled.
So what happens when the fire guys, in your experience, approach a fire started by an incendiary device and hear what sounds like gunshots? Are they going to keep putting out that fire?
No, they're not going to go near the fire
Well, why not?
because it's putting other people in harm's way. Because if they're hearing any type of explosion or any type of ammunition going off, they're not going to put their firemen in harm's way.
So would those bullets potentially make that incendiary device that you talked about in cross-examination even more effective?
Yes, it can, yes,
Because no one's going to want to put out that fire, right?
correct.
I have nothing further.
Do you have any recross, Ms. Spengler?
Thank you.
All right. It looks like the jury has some questions for you, sir. Give us just a moment, please. All right, would counsel please approach? And members of the jury, there are quite a few questions here, so feel free to chat with each other, just not about the case. Okay. right, sir, the jury has submitted some questions that they would like me to ask you. I have found, based on the rules of evidence and other applicable rules of law, that some of the questions are appropriate.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask those questions now. The first question is, it looks like the lamp, far corner, is on in the video. Was it on when you entered, or was the apartment completely dark, no lights on?
No, the lamp was on when we entered.
The next question, what would make the lamp blue on the video? If you know, you cannot speculate if you know.
I do not know, sir.
The next question is on the form that I have marked as 96. The question is, in your experience, flash training as a bomb technician, had the jars with the rifle ammo and napalm exploded, what would this have done to the rifle ammo? Example, does it spray them everywhere or do they explode? Again, if you know.
It would basically spray them everywhere.
Next question. What was in the orange bottles laying on the floor near the fire case shells, if you know?
The orange bottles?
I'm just reading the question the way it was presented.
If you could read it one more time for me. Please.
What was in the orange bottles laying on the floor near the fire case shells, if you know?
I couldn't tell you without actually looking at the pictures.
The next question is, what was the blinking item on the floor, if you know?
Well, there were several blinking items. Two of them were a launch control devices, and then there was another single LED blinking item near the thermos that was the rear portion of the bicycle. You know how most bicycles have a front light and then a red flashing little triangle or like a little stop sign reflector? That's what that was.
The next question. By the time you proceeded to render the apartment safe, had you learned what exactly the chemicals and powder were? And you should answer this yes or no.
Yes.
The next question, did you find out that the defendant had talked to law enforcement about what was in the apartment? And if so, when did you find that out?
Yes, we did, and it was on the second day on Saturday during our morning briefing.
Next question, what would trip the booby trap fishing line? Opening the door did not seem to. How did you know it was safe for the robot to open the door? So this is one question that has three parts, and you can only answer them if you know. Please do not speculate.
Okay.
And if you want me to read it again, I can read it again.
Please do.
All right. The first part of the question is, what would trip the booby trap fishing line? If you know.
Somebody would actually have to push on the line for it to be tripped.
The second part is not really a question, it's a setup to the next question, I think. Opening the door did not seem to. How did you know it was safe for the robot to open the door?
We did not know. That's why we sent the robot in. If the robot, something happens to the robot, we can replace it. We can't replace the human.
The next question is, what was the item flashing on the floor in front of the frying pan? Was it in fact a dangerous item once you learned what it was?
No. The flashing light is the rear light of a bicycle, like I mentioned before. It's kind of like a stop sign in shape. The reflective portion is removed, and it's just the LED light, red light flashing.
The next question is, based on your observations, do not speculate. So based on your observations, you cannot speculate. Did the apartment seem staged or for show, or did it appear the setup was genuinely configured to go off?
It basically was, from my observations, it was configured to go off.
And the follow-up question is, if it seemed genuinely intended to go off, would there have been any danger from the empty shells?
I couldn't answer that.
Okay? And the final, actually, that's it. Any follow-up questions based on those questions, Mr. Orman?
No, Your Honor.
Any follow-up questions from you, Ms. Spengler?
No, thank you.
All right, may this witness be released from his subpoena?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection?
Objection.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would counsel please approach to talk about scheduling? All right, members of the jury, it's about 10 till 12, and so rather than start with the next witness and then interrupt that testimony, what I'm going to do is go ahead and take our lunch break at this time. So let's plan on taking about an hour and a half, maybe a little bit longer. I have an en banc meeting at lunch. That's a meeting where all the judges have to be present and they all have to attend, and so it may take me a little, 5 minutes or so longer than usual. So let's plan to be back at 1:25. Please remember that my advisements apply during the lunch break, all of them, okay? Enjoy your lunch, and we'll see you back here at about 1:25. The record should reflect the jury has exited the courtroom. Is there anything we need to take up on behalf of the people at this time, Mr. Orman?
Not, Your Honor.
Okay, anything on behalf of the defense? Ms. Spengler?
No.
Okay, enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you back here at about 1:25. The court will be in recess. Thank you.